All right, it is 9 o'clock. So we're going to kick this off. Good morning, everyone. My name is Ted Harris. I am with the Pennsylvania Petroleum Association. I would like to welcome you all to our monthly webinar series. We have been doing this series for over 4 years now. It normally takes place the first Tuesday of the month at 9 a.m. Our presenters are a mix of associate members like Gray, as well as state and federal agencies that are covering topics that are hopefully meaningful to your business. Our goal with this is to provide educational, valuable content in a 30 to 60-minute time slot each month. And again, we're things that you can take back into your business and incorporate it and benefit from. So I know we have a handful of people that have been on this webinar multiple times in the past. Thank you for joining us again, and we certainly have a couple new individuals on here today. So thank you for taking the time out of your morning and being a part of this. Before we get started, just a really quick housekeeping item on my end. You all are going to be on mute for the entire webinar today. With that being said, we do encourage you to ask questions, and you can do that by using the question feature and go to webinar. Marty's going to be covering a really comprehensive overview of data collected within the industry. So certainly hope you have some questions from that. And what we'll do, Marty's agreed to, if we have something come in that's relevant to where he's at in the presentation, I'll pause and moderate the question to him. And if we have something that comes in, that could wait until the end, we'll wait until the end and moderate at the end. So if we do run out of time today, we have a hard 1 hour stop. But if we run out of time and there's something you're looking for in terms of what Marty covered today that we didn't answer, I will absolutely connect you after the fact and hopefully get you some clarification. So with that being said, I'm going to introduce our speaker here today. Marty Kirshner is a partner and the head of the Energy Practice Group at Gray. He's going to be covering 2022 energy survey results to our membership. So Marty, I'll pass it off to you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Ted. And I'm really excited. This is, I think, my first time really presenting with the Pennsylvania Petroleum Association. And so I really appreciate the time you guys are giving me today. My goal from this presentation is to give you, let me just move the slides here. That's me. So, again, the goal today is to give you guys a high-level overview of the energy survey results. This is our 31st or 32nd year doing it, and what I did was I took the key highlights from the survey, things that really stood out, and wanted to just go over them with you in some more detail, give you some of the opinions, some of the things that I'm seeing and hearing in the industry, and just again help you utilize this survey as a decision-making tool as we enter into the upcoming heating season. Obviously, we're in some very weird times, both politically, environmentally, geographically. So a lot of challenges have come up over the past 2 to 3 years that we haven't been used to seeing before. And I think a lot of companies in this space, I would say the overall majority have been resilient in their ability to adapt. And a lot of the questions that we're asking in this year's survey were more centered around some of those challenges, whether it was the Russian-Ukraine war, whether it's inflation, whether it's dealing with the Great Resignation. A lot of questions are around workforce and workforce development. How do we retain employees? How do we keep them? How do we recruit? So we're going to spend some time on that today. As Ted mentioned, as we're going through, if you have any questions, you can ask him and he will stop me and I will do my best to answer them. If I don't have an answer at the exact moment, I will obviously do what I can to find you the correct answer. And again, I hope you enjoy it. And so just so we know too, this is really going over the overall results. If you have downloaded the survey off our website, you can also download it by region. So you can look at, I think we broke it out based on, for the energy survey, it's based on size of company, which is number of gallons. Historically, we haven't done it by region, but if it's something we're interested by region, we can also put that together for you later. If you reach out to me, I can definitely see what I can do to put that together. And I even talked with Ted about doing something specific to the state of Pennsylvania at some point so that we can get a real nice tool for the members to really drill in on some of this data. So just to get going here, to kind of set the table, the average size company that responded this year was about 28 full-time employees with 7 service technicians and 8 delivery drivers. I think it's important to know what the average size is because we do have a lot of companies that respond that might be, 3 to 5 employees, 1 to 2 trucks, and then there's always a couple outliers where there's 150 to 200 employees, but ultimately the core is this traditional sized company, which is about 30 employees, at least 8 or 9 delivery vehicles, at least 8 or 9 service trucks. So take that as perspective when you're listening to these questions, if you feel like they can apply to you or if they don't apply to you because you don't fall into that average size. So the first question came, the other part I wanted to mention is over the past few years as we've evolved the survey, we partnered with Angus because Angus has some software that can really also dovetail nicely with the questions that we're asking. We utilize that data as part of our survey now just to enhance the value. So the question this year about number of customers per service technician. So the number is 827 customers served per service technician. And just to give perspective, that's up from 796 from last year, which is what we would probably expect given the number of service technicians entering the market has obviously waned and people are starting to retire and recruiting and retaining is hard. So I would say as a business owner, if you have access to this data, look at how many customers per service technician you are currently getting out of your techs and know that this is the average and know that if you're significantly higher than this, you could be burning them out. And if you're significantly lower than this, there could be capacity for them to do more. We're always very cognizant when we're advising clients on their service business to look at the utilization of their service technicians. Usually the good ones are the ones that are getting used the most and sometimes can get burnt out, whereas ones that are lower performing, and sometimes you'll see it in utilization and they could be doing more, but at the same time, we're in a point in time now where you can't just let people go. Some able body is better than no able body, and so there's definitely an appreciation for that. But keep on track of this number. I think it's really important because technicians are kind of diamonds in the rough right now, and we need to do what we can to maintain them. And this number, I believe, is a good depiction of what they're doing. I'm sorry. This other question we asked, again, trying to look at workforce development here, is what percentage of your delivery drivers are cross-trained as HVAC technicians? Now, the number is only 16%, but that has come up from 14% last year because, again, when you're resource constrained, you need to look for ways to leverage your current workforce. And so companies have started to evolve in terms of training their drivers to become technicians, paying for them to get the licenses. Again, this is to the extent that they want to. I think it's important that if you're going to have a driver that could do service work, that you incentivize them to want to do it, because I think someone that can wear multiple hats is obviously more valuable than someone who can only do one thing. The jack of all trades right now is a very valuable thing to have. So keeping that in mind, if you're really having a hard time getting people into the door, that cross-training will be important. If you have technicians, hopefully it's not too hard that they can go get their CDL and do deliveries. Just even if you're in a pinch and you're short drivers, we're starting to get past the whole COVID thing where drivers were out with COVID and you were scrambling to find someone to go make those deliveries. But at the end of the day, having a fully trained workforce that can do anything will not only be good for you in the case of servicing the customer, but it'll also be good for them as we continue to talk down through the needs of what employees want. Because what we've learned over the years is that employees want more than what they're just doing. We're kind of long past the days of a career delivery driver, so to speak, or a career service technician. There's a different mindset and they want to do different things and they want to feel more valuable to the organization. And this is definitely one way to do that. This is both my favorite and least favorite question on the survey about hourly pay. And the reason why it's my favorite is because obviously it's giving data that would be valuable to any business owner out there. Why it's my least favorite is because I'm very well aware that when you do a survey like this and you ask a question like this, you're not going to get the full truth. And so what I can tell you is there's probably several of you looking at this saying, there's no way the average delivery driver is only making $25 an hour. I'm paying my drivers $35, maybe some cases $40 an hour. And so I can appreciate that when people answer this question, they don't answer it the fullest truth, because again, if the drivers or the technicians or any of these employees listed here would get a hold of it and they say, well, this is the average, I'm getting way below the average, what are you doing here? So I usually say with a question like this, you want to definitely probably add another 15 to 20% to the numbers. But again, we're not going to compromise the integrity of the data. But as you can see, the driver wages have gone up, not a significant percentage, because again, I think people were sandbagging the question, but it really has probably been I've seen companies raising driver technician wages at least 7 to 10% year over year, and I think that's going to continue to grow until we start to see some semblance of a recession. I'm sorry. And then the other question that really showed the biggest increase was the CFO controller question. And the reason why that jumped is because we also added a new layer for bookkeeping / accounting manager. At the end of the day, titles are very hard to match up to the skill set. Someone that we call a CFO at one company might be looked at no better than a glorified bookkeeper at another company, and it really just depends on the size of the company. So you got to take that with a grain of salt when you're looking at these and what you consider as a title, because it's not a one size fits all. But general manager has definitely been a very valuable position, and that had one of the largest increases per hour as well. So to the extent you can bring in a general manager, especially if you're the key decision maker and you need someone to kind of execute your vision so that you can focus on growing the business and you're not caught up in the weeds, that's been a very popular role that a lot of clients have been asking us to help them recruit for lately. But again, this question, add 20% across the board for both years, and that really is probably a more accurate depiction of what the average wages should be. This question is more dedicated to salespeople, how much you're bringing them in, how much should they bring in per new account. The $133 per account is actually very similar to what it was last year. The question becomes, do you pay that to them every year that you have the account? Is it a one-time thing? We've found a very 50-50 split in terms of the success that companies have when they bring in outside salespeople. A lot of that has to do with the fact that we're long past the days where you can go knock on people's doors to try to sell to them. You know, I always use this joke. I don't know if anyone's familiar with the comedian Sebastian Maniscalco, but he has this joke where, you know, when he was a kid growing up, if someone came over at 7 o'clock on a Sunday night, the family would stop what they're doing, they would get excited, and they'd say, "Oh my God, we have company," and they would, you know, have a cake ready to go and everything. And now if it's Sunday night and it's dark out, it's 7 p.m. and someone knocks on your door, rings your doorbell, you hide behind the couch and you grab a weapon because you don't know what the hell they're doing there. So the customer behavior has changed, and you need to change with it. So you need to really do a good cost-benefit analysis as to whether it makes sense to have an outside salesperson. And then the commission on the new equipment installation, so that's 7%, which is around what it was last year. The key here, when you're looking at this, if this is a percentage that resonates with you, is my recommendation is that percentage should be based on the gross profit percentage of the installation and not necessarily the revenue on the installation. Because if the salesman quotes a installation job and it's an aggressive quote just to win the work, just so they can get their commission, and you're not making money off it, then there's really not a good incentive for them to get commissioned on it. So try to do that based on gross profit percentage. Once I just have some water. So this question talks about outside of payroll, which operating expenses have increased the most and why. Obviously, vehicle expenses increased the most because of the cost of fuel. I think that is something that we are all experiencing. That has started to wane a little bit, but that was, you know, it wasn't focused on the number of vehicle repairs. In fact, many companies talk about replacing vehicles rather than repairing vehicles. So then the next few ones are the ones that have been really pain points for a lot of companies: health insurance and liability insurance. And again, I tell this to everyone, even though, you know, I could be on the wrong side of this one day too, but if you have insurance, especially on the liability side, and it's been going up steadily, it's the type of thing where you need to put it out to bid every couple of years and try to get a competitive rate. I've actually been a lot of the client the other day who has, they're a big company, probably around 200 employees, and they were able to cut their liability insurance by $300,000 by switching. I've had other companies look at trying the alternative routes, whether it be captive, self-insuring, but it's an expense that you got to look at with a fine-tooth comb because it's one of your biggest operating expenses, and if it's continuing to go up, the only place you're going to be able to recover that in is through margin or delivery fee, and that's not always a viable option either. And then the new one on this list, which is really exciting for us to see, is cybersecurity insurance, which is at 10%. It wasn't even showing up last year at all. You know, cybersecurity has become a very hot button topic for every business owner. We've been advising our clients on a lot of it, so much so that we even opened up an outsourced cybersecurity consulting practice because we were concerned for our clients and their well-being. And as business owners and operators here that have access to credit card information, all it takes is one breach and you're probably out of business, to be honest, because how are you going to explain to your customers when they trusted you to hold on to their information, and it got released to the general public. So it's definitely something that you need to pay close attention. And there's a future slide that speaks to the positivity of how the industry has responded to it. I mean, this question is almost beating a dead horse. So retaining good employees over the past year, overwhelmingly somewhat difficult to very difficult. So 71% say it's somewhat difficult to very difficult. We are definitely living in the Great Resignation, and it's now time to look at employees differently than what we've looked at in the past. So we try to talk about what are you doing to retain employees. And again, a lot of conversations I've had, the number one answer has been raising wages and paying bonuses. And I do think that's great, and I think it helps, but it's ultimately at the end of the day a short-term band-aid. If you start raising their wages and paying bonuses, you're going to set a precedent to them that they can continue to feel that that's going to continue to happen. If you need to pay someone more just to keep them, then they're probably going to leave you for that much more to go to someone else if they can up the ante. So it's really looking at alternative ways to keep employees. At the end of the day, too, when you have a lot of these younger folks coming in to these businesses and their name isn't on the door, they know that their growth path is already limited. And in this world where people kind of want to be more involved, want to work their way up more, you know, like I said, they don't want to be a career driver. Maybe they want to drive for a couple of years and then try something different within the business, or start to work their way up to a supervisor or manager role. I do think some of the best ways to do it involve creating different pathways for when they come in, and really selling the employee on culture. Another example has to do with flexible scheduling, so to speak. You know, if you have a driver that's always woken up at 4 a.m. to get their deliveries done, you know, on the road by 5, 6, and, you know, they call it a day by 3 or 4 and on to the next day. But you say to them, hey, maybe you can start your day at 9, maybe be able to see your kids off to school and do some things that maybe you weren't able to do in the past. As long as the customer is taken care of and everything else is done and you've done your job, then we can work with that. That's become a really popular thing. I'm also a big believer in the golden handcuffs plans. I don't know how many people here have used them or are familiar with them, but at the highest level, simply explained, if you have a key employee that you want to keep them, you don't want to risk losing them, you see their value, and so you enter into this golden handcuffs plan where essentially you say something to them like, for instance, hey, if you stay here for 10 years, on your 10-year anniversary, I'm going to give you a bonus of $50,000, which for them is obviously life-changing. And then what you do is you go get a life insurance policy, and it's specific to the program, and the policy builds exactly enough value so that by that 10th year you have that $50,000 bonus already escrowed. And at the end of the day, too, it's not a huge cash outflow for you because you've been doing this incrementally over the years. And that's going to be a really hard thing for an employee to walk away from when they have to consider leaving the company. To walk away from potential of $50,000. And hey, if they do leave, then guess what? You still have this life insurance policy that the company's still the owner of. So if something happened to the employee, you could either cash in on the proceeds and take care of their family, you could reinvest it in the company, or you could repurpose it for the next key employee that you have. So it's kind of a win-win for the company, and there's obviously some tax deductions that can come with it too. But that's, to me, has been a lot of the larger companies, and I say larger, I would say the average size company, 30 employees up, have really looked into these programs. And if it's something you're interested in, I can talk to you about it, but I recommend you look into it. I think it's just huge to anchor some of these employees to your company for the long term, and that's one way to do it. But again, it doesn't solve it's all about the money situation. You know, increased 401k and pension. It's nice. You feel good when you're doing it as management, but the employees don't value it the way you want them to. So again, I go back to culture, career pathways for them, opportunities to be part of the decision-making process. And again, letting them know that there's an opportunity for them to move up in this company, even if their last name isn't so-and-so energy or so-and-so oil or so-and-so propane. And on the same part of retaining, it's obviously recruiting. And 80% say it's very difficult to nearly impossible to find new employees over the past year. And it's a question that I face in our industry too, because it's not like there's less people on the planet. It's just where they all go, where are they working? And I don't have the magic answer for that, but I do know that it's very difficult to find new employees. And so a lot of the steps taken to hire qualified employees is very similar to what it takes to retain your current employees. Again, you can try to just offer higher wages, but I tell you, if you're offering a quarter more for them, they'll leave you for a quarter more for somebody else. I found a lot of success has been on the training programs. It's having your own internal training programs, and it's also taking it a step further where, you know, you link up with the vocational schools, but not just link up with the schools, link up with the people that are doing the training classes and hire them to do your internal training, your company. And what we've seen is that the students that are in that vocational class for that teacher who's now working at that company, they'll follow them to that company. And that's a really good way to kind of steer people towards the industry, towards your work. You know, more qualified, more paid vacation time and flexible hours. I think they all want that. I think it's a hard thing to acquiesce on when you're short staffed, but also you got a business to run and you have to service customers 24/7. Signing bonus is nice, but again, it's one of those things where you get it in the beginning, you tell them, okay, you stay for a year, you get to keep it, and then they leave after a year. So I'm just trying to drive the point home that money isn't everything, and it's looking at other things outside of just raising their paycheck every week to figure out what makes them tick and what can make them stay. Because if you can keep an employee who likes working for you and is willing to make less money to work for you than to go work for somebody else, then you've done a really good job. And that's the hard battle that you have when you have employees at will. We're not like the professional sports leagues where we're guaranteed a certain amount of years that we have to keep them happy or keep them employed before they can go do something else. They're a free agent after every day of their work life. So you need to think of ways to continue to want them to, quote unquote, re-sign with you. I've also seen a lot of businesses provide housing for employees, which has been a huge sell. Because again, we're living in expensive times here, and you know, even if you're making $35 an hour as a driver, which is more than they've ever made, the cost of living has just become insane. And so if you can provide housing or subsidize their rent for them, or help them with daycare tuition, you know, I got 3 kids, and the cost of daycare far exceeds my mortgage, and so I'm obviously able to get by, but there's a lot of people out there that's a real struggle, and it's hard to balance that work and home life when you're just completely financially strapped all the time. But to the point, you know, while it's been very difficult to find new workers, this statistic lays out what has been the most successful. Word of mouth. I've found that a lot of the drivers and technicians all seem to be in the same fraternity where they all kind of talk to each other. I don't know if they all go to the same watering hole, but they all seem to know when things are going on. And so word of mouth has obviously been huge. Online websites, social media. I've seen a lot of companies really ramp up their LinkedIn game where, I mean, you might not find a lot of the technical folks on LinkedIn, but some of the middle management, upper management, internal office folks you can find on there. And those people are just as much in need a lot of the time right now as your drivers and techs. You know, job fairs are like trade shows. They're starting to become a little extinct. And obviously as 13% responded, they threw their hands up and said, no luck at all. So I still hang my hat on the vocational and trade schools. We really got to push those as the college tuition continues to reach astronomical levels. I do think you're going to start to see a push for kids to go into the trades, and it's important that you keep an eye on that trend because that's where your pool of future leaders is, and you need to make them future leaders. So another obviously expensive benefit to employees is the cost of health insurance. So this statistic, this was the first year we asked this question, and my pledge for next year is to not only ask it again, but to break it out between the type of employee, whether it's full-time, part-time, and to also break it out between whether you cover a family plan or an individual plan, because I do realize that you might cover all of an individual, but you might only cover part of a family because it's obviously more expensive. I would just say that at this point, you should be paying at least 50% of your employees, whether they're on a family or individual plan, of their health insurance, just to be competitive. If you're doing less than 50, you know, you're really putting a financial burden on them. So the dollars per hour start to mean less when they're having to pay more for their health insurance and for some of their other benefits. So I'd like to see more companies get up to the 51 to 75 and really into the 75% threshold. So really, you know, as we've alluded to before, the cost of health insurance has gone up, and you as a business owner can, again, try to raise your margin or charge fees or diversify in order to overcome that cost, but the employee doesn't have as much power to overcome the cost of that unless they're getting raises commensurate with the profitability of the business. So it does make it a lot more difficult. And this is something that really can bog down a family or an individual for that matter, especially if they have a lot of health problems. So going away from benefits and looking more at the customer list now. So this question actually was very interesting to me. It was not what I expected at all, but the most popular reason for customer list growing was actually other. I was really expecting it to see acquisition, but a lot of companies are continuing to grow their list, or they say they're growing their list organically through word of mouth, aggressive pricing, taking advantage of poor service from their competitors, conversions, but most importantly, great service, or they've invested a lot more in their marketing efforts. I've seen a lot of companies heavily invest in not just social media, but online advertising, Google, making sure that you're kind of the top list, the top hit when someone's searching for an energy service provider in a specific area. So there is ways to grow without just making an acquisition. Obviously, an acquisition can be one of the more expensive ones, but there's probably a higher return rate on those than you might see with some of these other things. But it's good to know that the industry still feels that organic growth can still exist to some extent, whereas I know there's a large contingency that says it's completely dead. And if your customer list, conversely, if you lost customers last year, what did you attribute them to leaving? And the highest one's always the usual: lost to competitor with lower prices, gas conversion, heat pumps, 15%. That's up significantly from last year. I don't know if I can tell you real quick what it was last year. Last year was only 7, so that percentage has more than doubled, and unfortunately, that's going to be something that we continue to see grow. Hopefully, you've removed the aversion to either doing an install of heat pumps or servicing heat pumps so that you can keep the customer to some extent if you've lost them to that conversion. But at the end of the day, what you don't want to be is losing your customers to poor service. That's the most damning thing that can happen to you, and if you're doing that, it's kind of your death pill at this point. I understand you can make mistakes or things happen, but in general, if you see a recurring pattern where they tell you they leave because of service, that's a problem. And what happens is a lot of times when they call to cancel their account with you and the CSR is taking the information, what we found is they'll just kind of default to, your pricing was too high, but never really dig into the real reasons why. So when you go look at the data at the end of the year, you just assume that you've lost all these customers because of pricing. But if you really took the time to interview them, almost do an exit interview, so to speak, you might find out that there's other reasons why they've left you. So it's important to know that as a business owner. What point? So a big thing we talk about is cleaning up your customer list, and the reason why, it's for a few reasons. One, if you're a company that's looking to sell, and your biggest asset that's not on your balance sheet is your customer list, you want to have that accurate, because that's really what someone's going to base their offer off of. It's not always going to be what you put down as numbers on your financial statement. The other reason why is we're also in times where price volatility has become extreme, inflation has become extreme. A lot of companies are heavily relying on debt and their line of credit. And we've seen a lot of lenders become very much, and this happened years ago, but it's come back where they're very much willing to lend against that customer list over and above, your traditional tangible hard assets. And so to the extent your customer list is cleaned up, it can allow you to really open up the floodgates for additional capital or financing if you need it. So 38% said they take a customer off their list after no deliveries for 12 months. I think that's pretty reasonable. If it's been a year and they haven't called you, then they probably don't need you. They're with someone else. But the fact that 21% said they never take customers off their customer list is actually pretty frustrating. And I think that that's not a good way to run your business. What's the point of inflating your customer list with fake names or customers that aren't really customers? It's only going to hurt you on the back end. And I would treat it like any other account that you have on your books or any other report that you maintain. You want to keep that up to date. And then, 20% or 19% say they do it when they notify us in writing. But I'll tell you, with the way America has gone, more often than not, they're not going to tell you in writing going forward. They're just going to silently go somewhere else. That's just how America is being groomed. The young homeowners of America, their main method of communication is text messaging and email. They're afraid of face-to-face conversation or phone call. So I would say don't sit around and wait for them to notify you in writing. Be proactive about it. So this is kind of a nice question too, and I have another statistic to share with it. So how long have your current customers been with your company? And so 62% of customers have a life of over 5 years. And I think that's important to note. Angus did a study recently, and it broke out the average customer life based on the services that they take from a company. And this was kind of obvious, but the customer that does automatic budget payments with a CAP program and a service contract and all the bells and whistles has an average life of 9.9 years. And then obviously the other side of that is your traditional will call customer who just doesn't take advantage of any of your services, no price cap, no contract, calls when they needs to, and that average life is obviously 1 year. But what we found was in between, each additional service that you provide to them added life to the customer. So whether it was just adding that service contract or adding that price cap program, or putting them on budget, or getting their credit card on file, all those things added to the life of a customer. So you all obviously have a diversified set of services that you provide, and I would argue that many of your customers only take advantage of a certain percent of your services. So before you worry about trying to bring in new customers, you're probably leaving some money and value and customer life on the table by not really drilling them home on your other services. If you only have 50% of your customers on a service contract, you really got to look at ways to get the other 50% on board. Again, budget payments I think are going to become very prevalent over the next heating season, especially where we don't know where pricing of product is going to come in. I was very concerned coming out of the last heating season in terms of receivables getting collected from customers when the price had spiked, and that has been very real. A lot of companies have their over 90 way too high over at this point in the summer heading into the heating season. And you really you can't put yourself in a position where you're acting as the bank for your customers. You're providing a service for them so that you can live and make your livelihood. They have their own job where they're making their livelihood, but they need to pay you to support your livelihood. So you need to figure out ways to get cash in the door quickly with them. Going back, like I mentioned before, on cybersecurity here, so how are you protecting your business against cyber and data? And I don't need to read all these, but what I just want you to see is that the percentage has gone up in every category, and the only one that went down was those who said they're not sure what they should be doing. At the very least, have cybersecurity insurance. And I would say the second most important thing to do on here is staff training. We use this software called KnowBe4, which I don't know if you've heard of it. If you haven't, I can send you the link to it or tell you about it. But basically, it's a series of 5-minute trainings that we have to do maybe once every 45 days. And I'll tell you, when I first got the emails with them, I was just getting aggravated. I was like, I don't have the time for this. I don't want to stop my day to do this. But at the end of the day, my IT guy was smart and basically said, well, hey, if you don't do this, we're going to shut off your email. So I had no choice, but I can safely say after doing this for 3 years now, I am so much more hyper aware of bad emails when they come through, phishing attacks, spam attacks. They'll oftentimes send us fake emails to see if we'll click on it, and then we have to know to report it if we know that it's bad, and we get a nice little congratulations if we do, and if we don't do it, we get called into the principal's office and basically get told that, hey, if that was real, we would have just brought down the company. But staff training is so important right now to prevent cybersecurity training. So again, if anyone's interested in getting a little bit more information on that, holler at me after this. Just on the diversification side, nothing earth-shattering here. What products or services are you considering adding in 2022? A lot of marketers are still looking to switch into propane, despite the high cost of steel and the barriers to entry that come into that. Even before the cost of steel shot through the moon, and we're talking even like 10 years ago, we found that it took at least 5 to 7 years to really recoup your investment in that. Once you've invested in the steel, invested in the bobtails, invested in the customer list, it's a very expensive thing. The two most popular things that I've seen companies look into right now is pest control. In fact, I was talking to Ted before, and I said, this industry has direct access to the customer home. You're one of the few people that are trusted in the home to do something when they're not home even sometimes. You got to find another way to service the home. And I said, if I was in a situation where we got hit with a huge storm and I had no heat or power or electricity, and I also knew there was mice running around my attic, first person I'm going to call is the pest control. I'll deal with being cold and having darkness. I don't want the rats in the house. So pest control is a very lucrative business, and it's a very nice diversified tool that you can offer to your customers that a lot of businesses have definitely done. And other things like water filtration or even home security systems has become another popular one where you can install the security system and also get a nice annuity revenue for monitoring it. So just think about other ways to service the home, and you're that one-stop shop. You become a home service company, not just a energy marketer and service company. So I know that doesn't sound like earth-shattering advice, but it's the type of advice that I would recommend just taking advantage of if you want to continue to grow. The 3 largest permanent business changes that companies made over the last 12 months, according to the survey, were either they basically, revamped their vehicle fleet, which made sense. We're still living in a time where you can buy new vehicles and take advantage of accelerated depreciation rules. Obviously, number 2, as we talked about, is more wages and vacation to try to appease the workforce. Infrastructure on IT, cybersecurity, upgrading that equipment, service, revamping their propane storage, and then acquisitions, looking at diversifying into different product lines and extending their current service areas like we just talked about. So these were the 4 most popular answers of the 3 largest business changes that were made. So hopefully you fall into at least one of these buckets. Again, like I mentioned, we tried to tie some questions into the Russian-Ukraine conflict. And one of the things that really made me happy was that the first statistic, that 70% of customers maintained their margin during the Russian-Ukraine conflict, which I saw across the board. I didn't have one company have a lower margin on their heating oil or propane during this time, whereas 5 years ago when we had a pretty substantial price spike, margins were dropping like crazy because everyone was so afraid to lose that customer. But now it's just like, hey, our operating costs have gone up, just like we got to fuel our vehicles and pay the same high gas prices. We got to pay a lot of money from our wholesalers to get this product. And we got to feed our families. So we're not going to cut our margin. And it seemed like everyone was kind of buying into that. And as a result, margins did not suffer. I know 23% said they did lower margin, but again, 70% maintained, and then the other 7% really would have increased their margin. So that split to me is very positive. And then I think the key was also just having great communication with your customers. I saw a lot of companies investing in their website, having a big banner on their website or a link explaining that, like, hey, we're in the middle of this conflict. Just because prices have increased, prices to go buy this product to ship to you, to deliver to your home, has increased for us too. So we're not price gouging you here. We're paying a lot more to get it. And so we're just maintaining our pricing structure to you. So please don't feel like you're getting fleeced, because obviously there's a lot of bad press out in the news where companies in this space were being accused of price gouging and taking advantage of customers. I know in New York, there's still the attorney general's on a witch hunt for some companies accusing them of price gouging. In fact, I had a contact that I knew who's actually a discounter, and they got subpoenaed over price gouging, which I found kind of ironic. It's like, if you're going to go after this industry for price gouging, why would you go after a discounter? They're probably the lowest priced people out there, but unfortunately, that's the world that we live in. I want to go back. The other thing too here, it's the lowest percentage, but it's also been very popular, is the increased line of credit. You need to be talking to your lenders about increasing your line of credit with the cost of product being higher. I have a lot more companies that are out on their line right now, more so than they ever have been, and they're also being compressed in their borrowing availability because of, oftentimes your line of credit's based on your inventory and your receivables. And if your receivables get over 90 days, you can't borrow against that. So it's really important that you increase your borrowing availability on the pre-90 stuff so that you can account for cash flow issues and increase product going into the season. I do like this question too, because it still speaks to the positivity of the industry. 77% of the industry feels like that this industry can remain viable and is confident that you can remain viable with all the crap we have going on politically and geographically. It's a lot of stuff going on in this industry. It's an industry under siege. A lot of the state organizations and national organizations are doing what they can to fight this battle, both at the state level and federal level. And it's one of those situations, and again, I was talking to Ted about this earlier, where everyone needs to pull their weight to support the industry. It seems a lot of times that 90% of marketers wait for the other 10% of the activist marketers to kind of do everything and do all the fighting, and then they'll jump in. But we're kind of getting to a point in time where everyone needs to get involved and support your state organization, support your federal organization, support your lobbyists in DC, and do what it takes so that we can have an industry for the next 50, 100, and beyond years. You know, I don't think electrification is going to put us out right now. I don't think it's going to put us out 25 years from now, but I can't think too much past 25 years at this point. But if we don't make some significant changes, and again, we'll get into the bio slides in a little bit. Here we go. Part of this improvement, I think, has to do with the willingness to blend biofuel. So 28% of the respondents said they blend biofuel, and obviously 72 said they didn't. That actually didn't really change from last year. So we're not seeing in our survey the increase in bioblending, and that's frustrating because this is supposed to be one of the big smoking guns to help the industry paint a better light to the fossil fuel haters, and it's obviously much greener. And so we need to do a better job of blending it, and of those who blended, you know, pretty close to B20 was the average, 18%. So obviously you had anywhere from 10 to 15 to 20 in terms of their blending, but only 40% say they're ready to increase the percentage of blending. So if you can't do your own blending, I would pay someone else to do the blending for you, but get that stuff into your trucks and out to your customers and communicate it. So those that are communicating it, they're relying on their website, they're relying on newsletters, they're relying on word of mouth. But it's a very important concept because, again, there's a larger contingency of people in this country that want to put fossil fuels out, and they don't have an education on biofuels, and they just assume it's like every other product that's come through, whether it was coal or heating oil or diesel, and it's different. So we need to educate them, because the problem is, for those that do blend it, only 13% are very confident their customers even know that they're blending it, whereas 60%, the overwhelming majority, are only somewhat confident, and 21% are not confident. So that's basically 80% of folks are either only not confident or somewhat confident that their customers even know that they're doing it. And so, again, I'm not trying to lecture. I just think at the end of the day, it's all about communication. You know, you're making a decision to blend it and to deliver it to your customers. You also need to go all in to market it to your customers. That's all I'm trying to say. And for those of you that can't do it, or it's just not a viable option, I get that too. But if it is viable and you're choosing not to, I guess I would just ask that you reconsider it. Again, just some general statistics. What percentage of active customers use a budget plan? 20%. Active customers on a price protection plan, 23%. Again, as I alluded to before, if you can start to increase those percentages, you're going to increase the life of those customers even more, and it's going to make your company more valuable without, again, having to do any kind of an acquisition. And then on price protected gallons, the percentage of protection is around 78% for a variable price plan, 14% for a fixed price plan, and 9% for a cap price. This question is another one that comes from Angus. It's the average gallons delivered per stop. And so I just want to make sure that I'm correct in what I'm saying here, because I believe that actually went down. Yeah, that went down from 201, which I did hear about a lot of companies trying to do smaller, larger quantity deliveries, A, to ease the burden of the customer so they didn't get hit with a huge bill, but B, to also generate additional revenues and cash flows into the door. I know Angus is, their big thing with their debt monitors is all about routing efficiency. So it's less about how many deliveries you make, but doing the most optimal routing so that, you're not filling up a tank frequently that doesn't need to be filled up, and you're also filling up at different times in the year. So, that aside, it's just the more efficient routing you have, the less fuel you're going to spend. So it becomes less about your cost per delivery from the cost of goods side, and more about reducing the operating costs and overhead that goes into creating that delivery, so that you're not so focused on increasing margin. It's more about reducing costs. So efficiency is huge. Another question here. So in the last 12 months, did you implement or increase a fee? Only 12% said yes, 84% said no. I know there was a big push for a lot of companies to do this, and to the extent it's legal in Pennsylvania, I can't sit here and say I'm sure it is or not. I know in Connecticut it's not legal, but a lot of companies even just tacked on a $5 fee to every delivery, and if you're doing 3,000 deliveries, that's just another additional $15,000, depending on what your size is, or times the number of deliveries. you do that, if you do 3 deliveries in a season, that can be another $40,000 or $50,000 over and above. So I think One Thoughts did a study on it, and only 1% of customers actually called and complained about that delivery fee because they're more focused on their price per gallon than they are, the ancillary fees at the bottom. So I would say you do it, and if you get that 1% that calls and complains, you just waive the fee. It's no big deal. It's not like they're not gonna send out some mass blast saying, hey, I called and complained, and now everyone should do it. But it's just an additional revenue service. And again, people understand that you're having to do more to make your business happen, just like every other business is having to increase their costs to deliver whatever service or product they're providing. And I'll just, as a quick aside, so the average delivery fee for a propane customer was $8.21. Service contracts here, so I was a little surprised to only see a 2% increase in service contract pricing. I think with the cost of inflation, you need to increase your service contracts at least 10 or 15%. And on propane, it was obviously a little more expensive. A big shift that I'm seeing is companies changing what is being covered under the contract. So, used to cover a lot of stuff, parts, tune-ups, tests and tunes, repairs, other things. Right now, companies have shifted towards, it's just a tune and test, and that's the only thing covered under it. Anything else over and above that tune and test is out of contract, and we're going to bill you at our standard hourly rates. And I really recommend that every company does that. You shouldn't still be living in a world where your service department is a loss leader to support the delivery. Your service department probably needs to be more profitable than your oil side at this point. And you have less people doing the work. They're costing you more. You need to recover that money. And you can do that right now. And customers aren't going to be as price sensitive or complain as much because they understand that that's what the cost is, and there's less people around that can do it. So increase the price of the service contract, cover less on it, and try to sell more of those contracts. And we did another study where it showed that almost 38% of customers on a contract don't even take advantage of their tune and test in a given year. So that is also just free money that you can get by pumping out those contracts. Hourly rate charges for service. So this was again from a national response. Fuel oil was $123. I just want to give you, I can pull it up real quickly here. So that's overall, but for a company that does, between 2 million and 5 million, it was around that 124 also. And these averages are up slightly over last year, but you want to make sure that your hourly labor rates are increasing in line with what you're paying your employees, if not more. Because if you give 10% raises and you only increase your billing rate 8%, you've just lost 2% of profit. Obviously, simple math, but I'd be lying to you if I said to you I've seen clients that have done that exact thing, and I've had to talk to them about understanding that you got to go 1 for 1 or more than 1 for 1 if you're going to increase your cost of labor, because your cost of parts have also increased too. So you can't, your profitability is under attack, whether it's the price of product, whether it's inflation, whether it's labor, steel, parts. You got to recover those costs, and you can't be afraid or ashamed to raise your price for fear of losing that customer. Because at the end of the day, if you're doing a good job on service and you're servicing that customer and you're there for them when they need you, you should be comfortable at night knowing that, hey, if you raise your price a little bit, they're not going to leave you. That's not every customer, I get it, but that needs to be the lion's share of your customer list. And then just some more statistics on some propane information. And for those of you that do it, 45% have multi-year contracts on propane tanks. And the average contract for those that have multi-year contracts is 5 years for above ground and 4 years for underground. And that was, all right, wow, I got through that in 48 minutes. So that was kind of the high level today. Again, that was based on the overall results. Ted, I don't know if there were any questions. I didn't see any come through, and I kind of just have talked here for the last 50 minutes, so I hope I didn't bore anybody. And again, I hope that, I didn't come here to try to lecture anybody. I really just wanted to give you my perspective. I work with a lot of business owners. I hear a lot of stories. I see a lot of pain points, and I try to take those pain points and share them with the masses as much as I can so that you can just hear about what's going on, and hopefully some of it resonates. This is a great industry. You guys are tremendous business owners, great people. I love it. I've been in it for 15 years now, and anything that I can do to help you guys support your business, help make you more profitable, or again, even just help with your employee retention side, please don't hesitate to reach out. I want to be a resource more than anything else.
Yeah, thank you, Marty. Very comprehensive survey, in a good way here, a lot to unpack. For anyone that joined late, as Marty alluded to, if you do have any questions, you can enter them into the question feature and go to webinar, and we can run through them right now before we conclude. But yeah, on my end, it's all about data, right? From an association perspective, we have a unique ability in our state, 400 plus members, to be able to, identify best practices, identify trends, and hats off to Gray and doing this on a beyond a Pennsylvania perspective for the overall industry itself. So, Marty, one question that I get all the time, and I didn't ask you this on the front end, but is this presentation available for anyone that would like to have a copy of it, or how can they? I know you guys have shared the survey data in terms of the raw data, but is this presentation available if that would be requested?
So I can definitely send you the presentation. I have no problem doing that at all. I'll email it to you, Ted. You can share that with membership. And if anyone wants to download copies of the survey, they can go right onto our website. It's right there, and you can even download past years as well if you need a comparative tool. But we don't make any money off this. This is all just meant for you guys to have information, and again, to kind of reinforce our support for the industry and provide some kind of valuable tool that you guys can make some decisions off of.
Awesome. Yeah, I got that question as I was asking it. So, all right, we answered that one. Yeah, I would, to Marty's point, I've already downloaded it on my end. There's their energy survey, which is for dual fuel marketers, as well as a heating oil only marketer, as well as their propane survey, which two different versions of it, and that's broken out. I'm sure there's some similarities across the board, but definitely check that out. As Marty alluded to, it's free to download. The data's free and use it. So I don't see anything else here. So Marty's information is on the screen. If you want to contact him, feel free to do so. If you'd like to contact me for any information, you can also do that through me directly. I also would like to thank Marty and Gray. They did join the PPA earlier this year. We're certainly excited to have them on board as being one of the leading accounting firms within the space. So Marty, any kind of closing comments or thoughts before we wrap up here?
No, again, I appreciate the opportunity. It's like I said, I'm here as a resource and nothing less. I mean, hopefully more. But if you're running into any of these challenges, I've done a lot of, especially on the employee retention side and dealing with the Great Resignation. I've done a lot of research on it. It's something I'm passionate about because it's something that I'm dealing with my own practice, and just happy to have those discussions with folks and really understand from people what's keeping them up at night, what their pain points are. So anything I can do to support your businesses, that's why we joined the organization, and so that's what we'll continue to be here for.
Excellent. Well, again, thank you all for joining us this morning. I hope you all have a great rest of the day. And for those that are coming to our fall conference next week, we look forward to seeing you, and take care, everyone.
Thank you.